Welcome to Power Up, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts, Nat and Kristen, as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Now, I feel like I need to start this episode with a joke, but I don't have one. Like something like a blue collar and a white collar and a priest entered a room, something, but I got nothing. I got nothing. Do you?
Do it now. Do it
But
now.
I
Go.
don't
Make one up.
have a joke.
We'll see if it's funny. Do you know, okay, on the
Yeah.
subject of jokes, have you heard this one? This is from my 5-year-old nephew. Why does the chicken cross the road?
Why? Yeah, that was a good one. That's a great start. Thank you for introducing the concept of no. I wanted to share a little bit of a story just to set the scene of why we are talking about, or I am talking, introducing this concept of blue collar and white collar, which, to be fair, it's a broad generalization, but it relates to my story. So I was chatting with someone who has an immense respect for another woman, and it was interesting that this person just simply prompted. He described her as, she's got this uncanny ability to ask a blue collar question in a white collar environment. And I thought it was a really interesting way to describe someone. And I kind of dug into a little bit. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And what they meant was that white collar questions in this person's eyes are often about like high level strategy, like sometimes what shareholders care about. Like you get to a size of an organization and you're constantly focused on growing more and the next thing and bigger this or abstract concepts. And yes, okay, it's a broad generalization, but it's often around like vision and positioning and kind of abstract terms, and you start to move away from when you first started of like just doing the simple stuff really well. Anyway, we can argue this all we want, but that was this person's take. Whereas a blue collar question was more honed in on, why are we doing this? What problem does this solve? What happens if we stop? Often super practical, more around process and operations. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have
Mm.
lots of thoughts. I would have thought those blue collar questions were the more strategic questions. And when I hear blue collar and white collar, like we're writing our newsletter this week on initiative, and I'm really digging into lots of like the different levels of autonomy and the different levels of delegation and followership and all of those different frameworks people have. And when I heard the blue collar, white collar thing, what actually in my head really struck me is ego. And quite often those white, and I think that, your description sort of articulated higher level strategy, vision, positioning. Most of those questions, in my opinion, often end up just being waffly and people trying to position themselves as being strategic rather than actually being strategic, which is what I'd say the blue collar questions are. Like, I'm gonna ask big rambly questions to make myself sound intelligent, and not risk ego bruising, like not risk being seen as asking a dumb question or asking for the basics because I want to position myself and we want to position this conversation as being higher level. But what you actually end up doing is missing the really important stuff and kind of waffling on about stuff that y- kind of only matters once you've got the
Yeah.
fundamentals sorted.
It's just so interesting that ego has such negative connotations when you say it. And I'm not suggesting you intended to say it that way, but it's got this negative
No, 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 no. It's like it's self-preservation
That's
rather
right. But
than
what's
business focus.
interesting is that I would suggest that most corporates, no, that's not fair. I can't even say the word most, but many corporates haven't created a safe environment anymore to be asking those questions. Like people often get penalized for those questions. And because I was kind of looking at research, and for the most part, when you get someone that's like the grit in a room that kind of lobs in the tough questions and is constantly, not constantly even, but raising objections, there's this thing around disrupting flow. And then immediately that person gets branded as disruptive. So quite often, corporates aren't a psychologically safe place to stay curious, and there's this whole phenomenon around that, is how you go from this, like, I don't know, move fast and break things environment to like a machine. And often machines are generating millions and billions of dollars. Like they're doing great stuff. I mean, we can't fault them for becoming like massive brands and money-making machines, but it's just becomes less safe to be the grit.
I wonder as well, this sort of ties back to our conversations about meetings and knowing the right place and right time. Like being the grit doesn't work when a decision's been made and it's time to get on with it and you're still talking about, all the things that could go wrong. But in those early conversations, and we probably need to do a better job in those meetings of distinguishing the type of conversation. Like I was thinking about this in terms of we were in multiple conversations several years ago about a particular strategy. And it was a pricing strategy. And it was very much everyone was asking all these questions and having this high level debate around, like, if we bring these people in, we're going to increase revenue by this and blah, blah, blah. And I was sitting there thinking, like, no, when you bring it in, the price is going to drop because, like, all sorts of things that no one was talking about. And I felt so stupid because I was like, why am I the only person here who seems to be like concerned about this very obvious factor? And then I asked a question and you'd said afterwards, like, no, no one thought to ask it. And I think that's to me, the distinction is like, there's all sorts of assumptions baked into some of these conversations. And it's very like, I used to say running a business on a spreadsheet, very like bake all the assumptions in and have these big conversations. And what I love about the concept of blue collar question, and I think that's probably, I mean, I agree, who cares about the labeling, but it probably does kind of position it in a way of being, yeah, more practical, operational rather than big picture strategic. So we might need to work on the labels. But I do think it's that really like starting, if we don't have the fundamentals right, if we haven't challenged our assumptions, if we haven't got a clear picture of what we're trying to achieve at the start, the rest of it becomes very easy to pull apart later on. And we see this all the time with like failed launches where, someone just hasn't asked the obvious question and it keeps going through, keeps going through, keeps going through. Next minute, this thing's launched that is so easy for people to immediately look at and go, well,
I
that was
know,
dumb.
I know, and I think we've chatted about this before, like, even the concept of Uber and women, and how a group of guys around a table might go, "This is actually a really great idea. Let's put women in the middle of the night, possibly after a couple drinks, in a car with a complete stranger who is unvetted, and, security and safety protocols are simply not there." Like, sounds like a great idea. I think it was like a woman gets harassed or attacked every 90 seconds in an Uber in globally, like, it's totally outrageous. Anyway, I think that's an example of something that lands, and you're like, "Why?" Like, what was happening in those rooms? And for those that have felt we've had a lot of power suitors join recently who fill out an intake form, short form, just to get a sense of where they're at. It's an incredible reflection, and what I've noticed is a real spike in people saying, "I want to get better at speaking up in internal meetings," which I think is amazing because that is, first of all, high level awareness. Secondly, the environment itself might not be a safe place to speak out. Like that's an interesting flag. But often people just want to know, how do I interject? What are the things I say? How might I get my point across without waffle? Like all that great stuff. So I just want to normalize that if you hesitate to speak up in meetings, you are in the majority because 70% of employees roughly hesitate to speak up. They're holding back ideas, and there's a bunch of reasons why, because they're making these mental calculations of, "Is this worth it?" So that is an interesting conversation in itself. Is this a hill that I'm gonna die on? Like, if I'm raising this thing, is this the thing to raise if I only get this one opportunity? What if I've missed something obvious? Like, does everyone know something I don't? Like, this is constant dialogue that happens in your head. Some of it is self-preservation for sure, and some of it, frankly, it's just the environment hasn't fostered a safe place for people to do that.
Would you say, I would say it's all self-preservation. It's just that your concept of self-preservation changes depending on your environment. And some of the stuff I was reading this morning around trust and risk feel like they factor quite heavily in this. That if I'm in a high trust environment, then it is a low risk to ask, let's say for the sake of today's podcast, blue collar question. Because what happens when the risk analysis that we're all doing is what will be the fallout for me? And if you are asking an obvious question, or if you are asking a question that no one else has asked, let's say, firstly, you risk asking something dumb that makes you look like you haven't read enough, you haven't done your background, you've missed something, all of that sort of stuff. It could be something that's really challenging and controversial and challenges relationships with people. Like there's all of that factor. You could also make the wrong call. Like you could ask the wrong question, and that will have increasingly bigger ramifications as you get more and more senior in your career because there is always a risk when you take on the responsibility of getting it wrong and having pushback or having consequences from that. All of that is true. But if you're in an environment where that kind of failure or mistakes or getting it wrong is seen as like great that you asked the question, in this case, like not here's why, here's where we've read about it before, here's where it was covered before, but please keep asking those questions. Your risk analysis goes in a completely different direction than if you ask those questions, you are perceived as being a troublemaker or getting in the way or being the grit. So I think it is different people have different individual thresholds, but different workplaces create different thresholds for where we feel comfortable. So I totally agree. And I think it is ego because it is about self preservation and positioning ourselves, but heavily influenced by the places we work and our own
Yeah,
thresholds
no,
as well.
that's fair. It'd be interesting just to dig in a bit on psychological safety. That in itself is quite a loaded term, and quite often we forget to ask what that means. And just in my research, I dug into this a little bit, and this actually came up in one of our mini master classes last week, and I've, like, totally drawn a blank. What were we chatting about again? Courageous conversations. That's what
First conversations,
and it
yeah.
was you need to create, this you trust, you mentioned that above, and, like, this concept of, "I feel safe," this person will feel safe with me delivering them feedback, and the same thing happens in meetings. I feel safe to raise my voice in a meeting, and actually, if anyone hasn't seen the documentary on Boeing and the effectively destruction of that business, like them going from one of the safest companies in the world to having all these like really crazy disasters. And it was because of their meeting culture and the way that they collaborated. No one felt safe. They were not psychologically safe to speak up and to question things, which was super interesting. But it came from someone called Amy Edmondson. She is a Harvard Business School professor, a researcher, and she was the one that coined psychological safety back in '99. Do you remember what you were doing in '99, Nat?
I think I was in year 11 at school or year 13. What would I have been? Year 13, year 11? I think I was either last year of school or a couple of
We
years
were
before that.
waiting for, Y2K, weren't we? In '99? Weren't we hiding in yeah,
Oh,
we were
yeah.
waiting for 90
We were well, actually, I climbed up the Mount Coco, which is across the road for that year, to see in the sunrise before the computers all blew up.
yet here we are, run by computers. Anyway, she was studying medical teams, and what she saw was that when people felt it was personally risky to speak up, look dumb, annoy the boss, rock the boat, they didn't, frankly, and but the risk didn't stay personal. Like initially, they're like, "I'm not going to ask this because it looks dumb." But what happened downstream as the result of them not asking that question was errors. Things didn't get flagged that should have been flagged. Ideas that could have helped never surfaced. Innovation effectively stalled in these environments. And so it was all about how can we create these cultures where it is safe for people to celebrate those that often are asking the things that are unasked and effectively to be the grit.
I love that because I remember a great example of a course I went to a couple of years ago, and they said, "Here is," they stated the definition of a good question, and they said a good question is one that's very articulate, well thought out, covers off something really tied to what we're discussing today, and then they're like, and a great question is something so dumb no one else even bothered to ask it even though they all wanted to. And I just loved that reframing that they created absolute explicit permission at the start to say, A, we encourage questions, and B, we define a great question as what most people would consider a dumb one because they're sitting there going, am I the only one thinking this? Because quite often, as we all know, those dumb questions are the things that everyone's wondering and everyone's too afraid to ask. So I really like that. And I also think those factors like looking dumb, annoying the boss, rocking the boat, being the grit. those things, if you make that a risk for people, if those things come into fruition when you ask a question, you are creating an environment where why on earth would you
And
bother?
and I wonder also if we've just become so used to, like, meetings run on autopilot, therefore we run on autopilot, and so we actually get, I don't know, numb, to actually spotting this stuff again. So I suppose I think the most powerful time for an employee to be, I don't know, the grit, the innovator, the question asker is at the beginning of their tenure. Like anyone who's starting new and joining a new environment or put on a new project team or introduced to a new something, often sees things with fresh eyes. And they're in the most powerful position to ask, why are things done like that? They bring external experience. So I think, number one, that's the most powerful time. But I think the second most powerful time is like just reminding yourself, like, what might fresh eyes look like at this point? Like, just sitting and actually really questioning, the next time you are in a meeting and to kind of, again, get curious. We talk about this a lot, but, you talked about great questions, and I think often we learn this from our mini masterclass of how to make an impact in meetings. Quite often, the starter, like, is so powerful, the opener of a question. Any tips? What's worked for you before, Nat? Or, like, what we could start with?
Yeah, I wanna go
Yeah.
one step back into almost the mindset, which I loved what you said about people are running on autopilots, meeting happening on autopilots, and we've covered a little bit about followership styles and effective followership, and to be an effective follower, AKA a really strong self-leader, you actually do need to know what you're talking about. You need to be actively engaged and understand what you're doing, and I think a lot of the time when we're in this autopilot mode, it's very easy to go, "Oh, I don't quite understand but I'm not gonna say anything." And I'm using the example of back at our last company, Hatch, and it's not about asking questions, but we had a mission that we really strongly believed in, and as the company grew, we would repeat the mission a lot. We really wanted people to understand it. And once I ran an experiment where I asked a team, "Can you tell me what our mission is?" And none of them could. And part of that was because they'd never said it. We'd always said it at them. And the other part was probably a real fear of getting it wrong. So then we reversed it and started to get different people to repeat our mission at different times. And it just struck me at that time that none of the people in our team as we grew who were, coming in thick and fast at one stage thought it was their responsibility to understand our mission inside out, or that it was fine to not have, like, really practiced it, and we created that environment, by the way, that wasn't on them. And it struck me that it's very similar to this, is if you have the mindset of, "If I don't fully understand it," or "It's not really my job," or "If I've missed something, that's me being dumb, it's not a problem with the thing," then we will never ask great questions because we kind of just assume it's not our job, and so I suppose my first step is to go into every meeting, every time we're engaging in something and operate as a self leader of if I'm here and I'm dedicating my time to this, I better understand what it is. And if I don't understand something, really try and overcome that default that a lot of us have to go, oh, it must be me. I've missed something or I'm dumb or whatever, and actively figure out what it is. And that often means asking a
Yeah, and
question.
I think that is the right strategy because we have a lot of people that are going into meetings for information collaboration's sake. So it's possible that they don't have a really strong perspective or experience as it relates to whatever the topic of the meeting is. But we always then invite them, ask the question, like actually have a question. And I don't even think you need to have a question prepped because one might hopefully will come up naturally and has to relate to the conversation in the room. But I think having an opener is probably a good start. So I'll throw out a couple, and then, Nat, if you've got some that you've used in the past, um, I like, please, let's chat about it. But I think a couple that come to mind is for me is I'm curious about, like actually introducing that you're curious about something. I'm curious about, and then you can fill in the blank of why we do things this way, or I don't know, has whatever I'm curious about. And the other one is I've noticed. I've noticed this kind of happening, or I've noticed we do things in this way. I'd love to understand why. I think those are really pretty non-confrontational ways to kind of interject and for people to hear your voice.
Yeah, I like the help me understand
Um,
because it is often that is the starter to help me understand the background of why we agreed to do this, the thinking behind this decision. instead of saying, "I think it's a bad idea," which is not always the questions we're asking. Often it is like, "I don't understand how this connects to this. Help me understand it." I think it's a really nice way of practicing curiosity and creating psychological safety as well, because people feel really comfortable answering those sorts of questions. I feel like specific questions can be really helpful. I'm saying this and I'm also disagreeing with myself because I think it really does depend on the context. Like, I'm going to say specific questions based on your area of expertise or your experiences. And I think this is that mindset shift too of you are in the room because you have a unique perspective, experiences, or expertise to bring to the table. It doesn't matter where you're at in your career. You could have just walked in the door the first time today, first job ever. You've got a wealth of experience pre your first job. You've got your experiences living, you've got your experiences being educated, you've got your experiences as a consumer, whatever it might be. So, really focusing on what is something that I may be aware of that other people in the room aren't aware of. And who was it that I saw that was a really, I'm not even going to be able to remember it, but someone I think that was talking about politicians and how, politicians who don't really represent their audiences, you can kinda tell because they'll kind of say, "We work for the working people," and it's like, "But you've never really been one of them, so what does that look like?" So, if you are someone in a position to go, "How would you, or why aren't we talking to this group of people, or have we spoken to this group of people before making this decision? Because they're gonna be really impacted, by it," or, "If we're making a big decision, have we tested this or what kind of testing have we done or what partnerships have we got?" So I say specific because it's like getting into the detail, but I would caveat that with you bring your area of expertise in. So if you're in a room full of like 40, 50-year olds and you're 19, recognize that your worldview is going to be slightly different. So you can ask a question that likely most other people in the room have missed around potential customers, people in the organization, potential partners, whatever it might be, different parts of the organization. I notice this a lot with customer success teams. They're often the last people to be asked for input and they have the most upfront experience with customers, all of that sort of stuff. Use that and ask,
Should we?
find the gap.
It
Is
feels
yeah,
like
should
there's a
we?
I'm curious about, help me to understand. It feels like there's a whole "should we" component, like you've spotted a gap, "should we?" for an opener, "Should we bring in the blah, blah, blah," or "This person knows a lot more, da, da, da." And then I think there's also this concept of you see something related to an opportunity or a future state. It could be like you have noticed you're not targeting a specific segment or speaking to a particular customer set, and you're curious about kind of like, why. And I think "why haven't we" is also totally appropriate. Like that feels, um, why haven't we tested this? Or why haven't we spoken to, I don't know, whatever, this group of customers before? Or why haven't we tried out this process? And people might say, "Oh, we have, blah, blah, blah." But for the most part, it's probably years ago and conditions have changed. So I think the "why haven't we?" Should we? And "I'm curious about, help me to understand." Great openers.
I also, going back to your blue collar questions example, I feel like the reason this person has been so successful is because she's almost got a short set of validation questions she asks before starting anything. And I just want to reiterate them. Why are we doing this? What problem does it solve? What happens if we stop? Like, even having those three questions in your back pocket all the time. And if they don't have clear answers, then we should probably get clear answers before moving forward. And I find those questions incredibly powerful because throughout my career, have found 90% of the time people can't answer them before, but they're wanting to push forward. And I think that can help. We're all active contributors to culture, and that can really help drive a cultural shift in an organization to say, it's okay if we don't know what we're doing yet to take a step back and kind of focus on those fundamentals before moving forward. So there's probably a couple more that we could all have in our toolkit. And that just becomes kind of the start of every new project, every new piece of work. Make sure, and not asking them necessarily assuming people don't have the answer, asking them assuming they do, and make sure you're all on the same page and really clear on what you're doing before
I
moving
think
forward.
sometimes we talk about time and place, and there is a thing associated with disrupting flow and time and place with, um, with questioning, and I don't wanna dissuade anyone from questioning, but I think there is a thing where meetings are tight, time is precious, decisions need to be made, and if you are the grit that throws a bomb into the middle of the table, no matter how diplomatically you put it, I think there is reason, to understand that that can be like, people are like, "Oh god, here we go. This is gonna press pause on the thing or disrupt this thing," and if you become the person that does that, I can appreciate in an environment that doesn't celebrate curiosity, that can be a thing, but efficiency as well, like, sometimes you do have to go off less information as well, and, take action. However, I just wanted to say for anyone really concerned with a highly charged environment where you are the person that probably will disrupt flow or might disrupt flow, so just again, think about culture, time, and place. Allies, allies, allies. We have a whole podcast segment on this. I think it is episode 104 because I checked it out this morning. So 104. It's a replay actually of something earlier, but this is about mastering the meeting before the meeting, and it's about testing your questions or finding allies to help you in that meeting to, I don't know, amplify your voice or your concerns or your questions. And so there's nothing wrong with going around and doing a little bit of prep and testing your curiosity and finding allies that are going to support you in that line of questioning if it's something you're worried about, like it's politically charged or it's siloed or there's agendas or there's elephants that, that would be like a bomb put out on the table. I think master the meeting before the meeting. Just it takes a little bit more prep.
Mm. Yeah, and I think you're right that asking good questions, if we go back to the ego thing, isn't about landing a question in a meeting. It's actually about genuine curiosity. So knowing the time and place, and often it is important to do it in advance because by the time you get to the meeting, like you say, in a lot of cultures, people equate efficiency with moving really fast rather than moving in the right direction. And so if you are surrounded by people in a meeting thinking that and you ask the question, what problem are we solving? They're going to all freak out and go, oh my gosh, we don't care. We just want to run fast. And if you instead ask it beforehand, I'm prepping for this meeting. I really want to understand. I know this. A, it gives people time to think about it. And B, it kind of means you're all coming in again on the same page without putting anyone on the spot. So I really like that, knowing your time. And also, like I say, if you come in quite late in the process, the decision's already been made. Probably not a great time to ask the same questions, kind of going back to square one in the beginning, in the meeting. But I love that idea of just use the questions before, after, even shoulder tapping someone after a meeting and say, I just didn't really understand why we did this, or can you fill me in, whatever it might be. Because floor space in a meeting is really scarce too. So and I think that's probably why a lot of us are afraid to ask questions because we're like, I don't want to dominate the whole conversation about my thing versus like being able to take it offline and ask it afterwards. So I think there's nuance here that you sort of pick up on over time. I would say though, don't let that put you off asking a question because if you notice that you did take the whole floor time, didn't work out, don't
Yeah.
do it again next time. Do
Yeah.
something different.
Your favorite meeting jargon to close out?
Favorite meeting jargon.
We had a co-founder at Hatch who loved a particular word you might remember. Synergy.
Is it circle
Synergy.
back?
Oh,
Oh,
circle back is a
synergy.
good one. Let's circle back on that one. If we could just circle back. Let's take this
Yeah.
offline. Can we take this offline?
We
Synergy.
also loved, I mean, this is not quite, I mean, this is probably more corporate jargon, guardrails. At one point, I think a bunch of us were gonna get 2 lines tattooed on our arms because we were talking about guardrails so much. Yeah, the synergies. Oh, what is that? Oh, there's so many. I think the circle back one
Circle
I
back.
find really hilarious.
Pure,
There's so many things that mean
yeah, pure
nothing.
aviation. We're just gonna circle back on this, i.e., I don't wanna deal with this right now. Taking this offline is like the parking lot thing. These are all important stuff, by the way, but, like, it's just so funny the way that we speak, and I love the synergy. Venn diagrams often come up. One that I say a lot, jargony, is, like, "Move the needle," and I know I use it a lot because it has been a mantra.
Yes, we
It's been
both
a
do.
mantra of mine, and it really helped me get clear on what was important, and for me, it was always, like, revenue driving, and when I think about revenue, I think of the speedometer in a, vehicle, and
Yeah.
I'm like, it goes up, your revenue goes up. For me, it was about, like, move the needle, like, it's been helpful to me, but I can appreciate, that can be annoying jargon. Um,
Do you think that's because they become so ubiquitous, they
yes.
become meaningless? Like, I agree with you. I think we both like moving the needle because we know what it means. We know what it means in our context, and it's a really good reminder. But if you work in an organization that says move the needle without having really any idea of what you're moving the needle towards, it kind of just becomes a bit silly. And if you're not ever circling back when you say you're circling back, and I think taking things offline is a great, like, I've used that a lot in stand-ups where like 5 minutes in, we're talking about one thing between two people, take it offline, have the follow-up conversation. But if it kind of
Going down a
becomes a
rabbit hole. There's our word for something that means going down a rabbit hole.
yeah, and that's in my opinion, more of like respecting other people's time. If it's a conversation between 2 and there's 10 of you in the room, take that one offline. No one else needs to be involved in it, but have the conversation. Or say, "We don't need to have this conversation. Let's just put a
Let's
pin
put
in
a pin
it."
in it. That just sounds like low-hanging fruit, Nat. Love it. I love it. It's definitely low-hanging fruit.
Low-hanging fruit. Quick win, a quick win.
Amazing. Thanks, everyone. Check out Powers. Oh,
Wait, I
go,
have a
go.
word origin. Close but no cigar.
Oh,
You know that
okay.
phrase?
Close but no cigar. Oh, I don't know. I'm thinking, I don't know why I've got like Three Stooges or something in my head. Okay, what is it?
Yeah, it feels like it should be. Apparently, it was when back in carnival games, like when there were carnivals, the prize used to be a cigar. So if you didn't get quite close to winning, it'd be like you were close, but you don't get the cigar. You didn't win.
That's very unhealthy.
I
That's
know.
terribly unhealthy.
I just find them so funny. Is that when I've become, like, really obsessed because we throw these phrases around so often, and it's like, isn't that weird that from, like, the oldie days at carnivals giving out cigars, we still use those phrases without it's almost like what we're talking about with corporate jargon. They've lost all
Well,
meaning.
they
We
are
just use them.
or you're right, they've lost the original intent, but they actually are loaded with meaning, and they're an efficient way to communicate with each other, so, yeah, well done. We're gonna circle back on that one. Okay, now I'm circling back
Will we? Will we, though?
to powersuit.com, everyone, and look forward to chatting to you next week. That's it for now.
Bye.
Bye.